Hi everyone. So today I'll be talking about the cognitive biases that are present in our daily decision making that could potentially affect our rationale in making decisions for our financial success. So more recently, economists have been analyzing human tendencies that were contrasting the behavior of predicted patterns under conventional economics. What was causing such irrational behavior? Behavioral economics have sought out Behavioral economists have sought out to explain the myriad of factors that contribute to individuals' irrational decision making and resulting actions. So, our brains, in using about 20% of our entire body's energy, are designed to work with maximal efficiency, so they begin to make shortcuts when we process information. Our brains are very quick to come to a decision when presented with a situation familiar to one from the past. This is largely in part due to our adaptation to survive in maximizing efficiency. So, cognitive biases play a large role in our irrational behavior, deviating from the standard of rational and logical. Cognitive biases, which have been developed due to our biological development, can be extremely detrimental to our decision making, especially in finance and economics, as such mistakes could lead to terrible consequences and even financial ruin. There are many different cognitive biases, and the main examples that will be discussed further in this paper are anchoring, confirmation bias, and hindsight bias. So to begin, anchoring is a type of bias that arises when an initial estimate for an expected value is the central focus that the individual is keeping in their head. So this mental anchor is the individual value that is the initial value that the individual will fluctuate around. Most people begin their decisions with this mental anchor and adjust as necessary to come up with their final decision. They try extremely hard to assess their current situation in comparison to the initial value that they've been accustomed to seeing that they might not even realize that the current situation presents a completely different set of factors where using the initial price or valuation can be disastrous. So the classic example for anchoring is Salvador. His name is Salvador Sale, I think, and he is the father. He is known to be the father of black pearls. So when he initially marketed these black pearls, no one had known about them and they didn't sell. So he brought them over to one of the most famous jewel servicers, and they would actually market the black pearl alongside diamonds, gems, and rubies, and in one of their Fifth Avenue stores. Um, Even like the first time that they marketed this, the black pearls were then sought after by very, very, very prominent figures, and they were willing to pay a very high price. So in this way, the price of black pearls had anchored on the price of diamonds, jewels, and other gems in order to establish a very high initial price. So, a possible way to combat this bias is by seeking less coherence with the prices they've been used to paying in the past and evaluating the quality and functionality of the product today based on the listed price to see if the product's value is worth its actual price. This is much easier said than done. However, by actively trying to remove the initial established price from the mind and assess the product or service's value strictly based on the expected utility it will bring, this will allow consumers to make smarter purchases and avoid irrational decisions. So, confirmation bias is our tendency to mold the environment and all of the information in ways that align more with what the individual believes to be right. We try to recall and interpret information in ways that support our belief, tending to ignore the other alternatives. We become selective in what in we become selective in what information we become responsive to, as we prefer to absorb only what is in line with our own stance on the current situation. An example of confirmation bias that can arise in the finance sector is when an investor is notified by his peers of a hot stock being a less politically correct term for a stock that has been trending very well. That investor might go out and seek all the financial data that supports that the stock is actually doing well, like low debt equity ratio and increasing cash flow. However, the investor might ignore some very important information like decreases in critical customers and decreases in market share. In only absorbing and processing the positives, this investor can actually make himself believe that, oh yeah, this stock is actually trending very well, while ignoring the important warnings and important red flags. So a way to combat confirmation bias, I actually took Michael Malbusin's proposed method. Michael Malbusin offers advice to combat confirmation bias in these steps. The individual must consider the entire scope of the possible decisions, attempt to prove himself wrong by asking certain questions, keep track of past decisions, and revisit these decisions to avoid similar mistakes in the present situation, and also avoid making important decisions in highly emotional states. So, in following these guidelines, Michael Malbusin offers a um, a comprehensive solution to combating confirmation bias. So the next bias we're talking about is hindsight bias. And hindsight bias is a tendency to perceive certain results as having been um, predictable after the results are already known, even though there was no true basis or ground for such prediction. There was no set rule or algorithm or probability equation to draw such a prediction. So claiming the event that occurred as having been predictable is completely without merit. So an example of hindsight bias is when a student who is struggling on an exam decides to guess and put an answer down. After the exam is over, he may realize that the answer that he put was actually wrong, and eventually he might yell, "Oh, I knew that! Oh, I knew that was wrong!" or "Oh, I knew that was the right answer." When this student voices these thoughts, he is exhibiting hindsight bias. He is claiming to have known the answer or which answer was actually wrong after the results were already known, not during the actual exam. So, in an experiment conducted by Buxar and Canali in 1988, the greatest danger of hindsight bias was determined to be the hindrance from learning from past experience due to increased overconfidence. So, this experiment has shown there to be a lot of repetitive decisions and behavior from people who have experienced hindsight bias. This is largely due to the overconfidence individuals feel when they exhibit hindsight bias. So when they experience this hindsight bias, they tend to be overconfident in their decision making and their behavior, and they tend to go and repeat and do the same exact and go ahead with the same exact behavior under the same mentality because they truly believe that they have been right, and this is largely due to the hindsight bias and the overconfidence that comes as a result. So, in studying behavioral finance and economics, it's important to understand that irrationality is due to the ingrained biological programming that we have been created upon. This irrational thinking can be due to a large number of factors, and cognitive biases that we all experience as humans is due to our brain's biological adaptation for efficiency and survival. In making quick connections and thus quick impulsive decisions, the brain can fall victim to these cognitive biases. The three cognitive biases that we have talked about today, anchoring, confirmation bias, and hindsight bias, can all um, be we all fall a victim to these biases every day on a daily basis at almost every other moment. So in learning how to combat these biases in order to control our mental processing to make more informed decisions will allow us to be more rational and be more conventional with our economic patterns and our actions. So thank you everyone for watching this video today, and I hope this video is very informative on cognitive biases and the roles that they play in behavioral finance.